Welcome back to live broadcast on KTAL LP FM in Las Cruces, New Mexico. You're listening to Science. Let's take a look. I'm your host, Vince Gucic, here every Tuesday, noon to 1. And let me start off by thanking again the people who joined our membership drive, became members, 82 of them, 5 of them as continuing members, or let's see, what's our term? Supporting members, monthly supporting members, and a number in the Century Club giving $101.50 for this year. You can recognize our call letters in that. Right now I'm here in the studio by myself talking about bacteria. I'd like to mention that next week, January 23rd, Tuesday, I'm going to have a guest, Professor Kathy Hanley from biology at NMSU, to talk about emerging viral diseases. She's a well-known researcher on this. I'd also like to note, looking back, that you can find recordings of all my past shows on YouTube. You can go to my YouTube channel, Vince, V-I-N-C-E 5305. You can also go to my website, science-technology-society.com, and on the homepage, you'll see links to all the shows and their segments. And I'd also like to note that I'd appreciate any comments and suggestions on what I've said or what you would like me to cover. You can leave comments on my website. You can text my phone, which is 575-571-2269. You can email me, Vince, V-I-N-C-E, at lascrucesacademy.org. Las Cruces Academy is where I'm the board chair. Okay, we were talking about bacteria, first of all, making vitamins for us, and then oxygen, including our ability to use oxygen within our very cells. But there's more to it. Some more things that bacteria are doing for us right now is that they take atmospheric nitrogen gas, simple chemical element, which we cannot use in any chemical reactions in our body, nor can other organisms, and they make it into what we call reactive nitrogen. So this is a really long, interesting story, which I won't go into at this time. But basically, bacteria evolved the way, some bacteria evolved a way to do this incredibly energy-intensive reaction, taking nitrogen gas, the N2 molecule, and combining it with effectively hydrogen, not as a gas, but carried on other compounds, and making ammonia. Well, the great thing about ammonia is that can be used to make amines and other things in the body, and particularly amino acids that we all need, every single organisms, the bacteria on up. We have relied on that for essentially our whole history as human beings until recently, back when Fritz Haber and Haber-Bosch developed an effective way to do chemical reactions, industrial synthesis of ammonia. They did it for crop production, but it was also for explosives. So there's a mixed history there. And now, industrially, we make about as much fixed nitrogen as do all the biological processes, also lumping in reactions of ozone and lightning and so on. Anyway, they helped us along for a long time. Then, of course, you have to say that bacteria are a big part of recycling dead matter. And it's been phrased that otherwise we'd be up to our hips in carcasses. Well, worse, nothing would happen. We'd run out of nutrients the first round. We would never have gotten here. They're helped along by lots of other organisms that break down the big chunks, even the collembola, and then you've got fungi helping. But bacteria do the main work there. And bacteria also help recycle nitrogen back into the atmosphere. So there are gills or groups of bacterial species that denitrify nitrogen. So suppose something dies and the proteins in their body get broken down, again, to things like ammonia. And then there are others that can oxidize that and make nitrate. And we actually have relied on that somewhat in agriculture. But then there are yet other groups of bacteria that can use that nitrate as an oxidant, as if it were like oxygen, to react with organic matter. And then they put gaseous nitrogen back into the air, or similarly, nitrous oxide. There's some interesting side stories there. So why is that good? I thought we wanted the reactive nitrogen. Well, yeah, but we don't want it to all accumulate in some place. This is a way to recycle nitrogen, the element, all the way around the globe. And you can contrast this with phosphorus. Okay, phosphorus has no gaseous forms. What's one of the main nutrient limitations for plant life and thus for everybody? The lack of phosphorus. It's right up there with lack of adequate amounts of nitrogen. We're actually running out of useful phosphate deposits for agriculture. And that's an interesting story, kind of scary too. We apply lots of phosphate fertilizers to crops, certainly in industrial agriculture that dominates food production around the world. Well, that phosphate gets taken up in the plants, and then we eat those plants at some site off farm. Well, in a word, we don't poop where we grow our food, at least not in industrial countries. So that means the phosphate ends up somewhere else, like in a sewage plant and eventually in the effluent, not back on the fields. So they're constantly being depleted in phosphorus as phosphate. And so we're mining phosphate all over the place. Morocco, Florida are two big places. And, Nauru, the island of Nauru basically disappeared because it was mined out of existence. So we're getting kind of touchy about that. Anyway, another thing, a whole set of things that bacteria do for us is in technology. Could be simple, making yogurt. Okay, you rely on that. But then on vast scales, bacteria are used to synthesize industrial solvents, to make gasohol, to make vodka, to make polylactic acid that gets turned into recyclable plastics. And they are used to make some things we would call biologically active chemical compounds. Insulin, it's a big deal. We used to extract it from pigs after slaughtering. There isn't that much around. There's not as many pigs as humans who could basically benefit from the insulin. So now it's made in genetically engineered bacteria. Okay. Similarly, we get our antibiotics mostly from bacteria and sometimes fungi and so on. These are products of what I might call natural bacterial warfare. Okay, you've got bacterial species A competing with bacterial species B, and one way that A can thrive is if it makes an antibiotic that either stalls or kills off B. And then this gets really complicated because then you get antibiotic resistance in bacteria. That started out as just natural bacterial resistance. You know, when various bacterial species were competing with each other, all the species developed some resistance to the other's antibiotic substances. But now we've really increased what we might call the selection pressure, the opportunity for bacteria to see lots of antibiotics, and then only the ones that have lots of resistance genes are the ones that thrive. So that's how we get MRSA, methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus. and lots of others. A little bit more controversial thing is that bacteria are the source of Bt toxin, Bacillus thuringiensis, natural bacterium. Its toxin is very potent against lots of insects who chew on our plants. And so that has been used both as a topical insecticide, but also genetically engineered into some crops so that when the insects come chewing on the plants, the Bt toxin is already there. The gene to make it has been introduced into those plants. A lot of these biologics are kind of tricky to make. Everybody said, oh, great, same genetic code, us, bacteria, plants. So bacteria could eventually make anything that we need biologically. The problem is that we often have to have some modifications, say, of proteins. You have to stick extra sugars on them. And a lot of that has been worked out, but it's still tricky. And another one that I will go into in this last segment will be making spider silk. So you can actually engineer bacteria to make the same silk that spiders spin their webs from. And I'm going to say silks because there's something like 27 different varieties of silk with different properties. And we'll hear about that in the next segment after a short station break here. Thanks for listening.